Denmark. Did you all have a nice Christmas? That's good. I did too. I went to visit my grandpa. He lives in South Wales. And we have this tradition that every Christmas Eve, me, my mum and my grandpa, we go for a drink at my grandpa's local pub. So me, my mum and my grandpa, we go into the pub and we walk over to the bar and the barman says, "What can I get you?" And my mum says, 3 pints of beer. And the barman says, "That'll be £9.20. So she gives him the money and she takes the change and we take our drinks and we go and sit down and we're just chatting, catching up. But there's something at the back of my mind, something that feels not quite right about the situation. Anyway, we start chatting about this tradition that we have of going for a drink together on Christmas Eve. And I started asking my grandpa about some of the things that he did when he was a kid growing up with his family in Wales at Christmas. And he said, back when he was a boy, when there were wolves in Wales, and birds the colour of red flannel petticoats whisked past the harp-shaped hills, he said they sang and wallowed all night and day in caves that smelt like Sunday afternoons in damp front farmhouse parlours. Which sounds like a nice way to spend Christmas, right? But he also said something about the snow. He said he remembers that Wales was always as white as Lapland at Christmas. And I thought that was interesting, because I seem to remember when I was younger that it snowed much more than it does now. But I'm never sure if that's down to a kind of nostalgia, or if the snow just seemed deeper because I was shorter. But he insisted that back then the snow was different, because unlike now, how it falls from the sky, back then it also came shoreling out of the ground and swam and drifted out the arms and hands and bodies of the trees. And, get this right, he said the snow grew overnight on the rooftops of houses like a pure and grandfather moss, minutely angling the walls and settling on the postman as he opened the gate like a dumb thunderstorm of white torn Christmas cards. And although he didn't say explicitly, I took him to be alluding to the effect that global warming has had on our climate. Anyway, the chat's going on, we're sharing stories, and I'm sort of just kind of half listening to my mum and my grandpa's conversation, and I'm looking around the pub and just watching people have a nice time in their holiday. And my eyes settle on 3 children who are sat around a table in the corner of the room. And they've obviously been brought to the pub as a kind of Christmas treat. And they've been given a bag of crisps to share. And they're dividing up the crisps between them, counting them out, taking size into account, showing the due concern that children often show for the distribution of luxury goods. And they get to the last round, and they only have 2 crisps left. And I can see that they've got a problem. That either one of the kids is going to have 1 less crisp than the other 2, or they're going to have to divide up those final 2 crisps so that they can all have exactly equal portions. And as I watched them in their predicament, I realised what it was that was bothering me earlier in the evening. £9.20 is not divisible by 3, so 3 of the same type of beer costing £9.20 that round that we had in. And when I realised this, I interrupted my grandpa's conversation. I said, Mum, £9.20 is not divisible by 3, so that round you got earlier, either it was different amounts for the same pint of beer, or the barman charges point something of a pence per beer, which doesn't make any sense either. But she didn't really seem to understand what I was saying, so I thought, I just go over and ask the barman. But with it being Christmas Eve, it's quite busy, so there's a good 3 people deep at the bar, so I just stand and I wait my turn. Anyway, he comes over and he says, how can I help? And I say, it's the wrong barman. It's not the barman that served us earlier in the evening. The barman that served us earlier in the evening is down the other end of the bar serving someone else. So I explain that I just need to talk to the barman. He goes over and speaks to the other barman, but obviously I have to wait because that person's that barman's serving someone else, so I'd just wait till he's finished. And when he comes over, he's about to speak to me, but then he realises he's got some snot just coming out of his nose. I kind of look a bit shocked, and he can feel it, obviously, so he kind of looks around for a tissue, but he hasn't got one. So he has to go into the back just to blow his nose, so I just wait while he goes. And then he comes over and he says, "Oh, how can I help?" And I say, "Well, the thing is, that round that we bought earlier, you probably remember I came in with Mum and my grandpa. It cost £9.20. It can't cost £9.20 because you can't have 3 of the same type of beer costing £9.20, because when you buy a group of things, the total amount has to be divisible by the number of units you've got. And the penny is the smallest unit in the British currency, so you can't have the number that's not divisible by 3 to make a leftover of the smaller of a penny, because it doesn't make any sense." And he said, "Oh yeah, I remember, that's right. No, I didn't charge you £9.20, I charged you £9.72. That's how much a round of 3 of those kind of beers cost." And I said, "Oh, I probably just misheard." But he was very nice about it, and I just went and sat down and finished my drink and had a really nice evening with my mum and my grandpa. I planned to read an essay that I've been working on this evening, but due to various reasons I haven't really managed to finish it, and I was wondering whether I should read the essay anyway in its kind of unfinished form, or whether I should. I kind of thought maybe it would be more interesting, more relevant to talk about some of the reasons that prevented me from finishing the writing. I don't know if you would have heard about it over here, but back home certain people have been saying different things, and I thought this might be a good opportunity to get my point of view out there. I'm from Edinburgh, I live in Edinburgh, and I moved there not that long ago. And earlier in the summer, a friend of mine, Kathy, invited me to be part of a feminist reading group, and I wouldn't say I'm interested in feminism any more than lots of other subjects, but I thought it would be a good opportunity to meet new people, and I really enjoy talking about things in groups, and so I decided to join, and it was good. In the beginning we were reading quite difficult stuff like Irigaray and Judith Butler and people like that, and I found it quite hard going, and the other people in the group, they're all very confident and really articulate and able to express their opinions very clearly, and I found that a bit intimidating, or at least maybe not intimidating, it's not the right word, but I sometimes found it difficult to voice or say things in the group, I guess. But we did nice things together. We also went to see films, and we went to see a film about Billie Jean King, called Billie Jean King. She was the best, I guess, tennis player, female tennis player in the 70s, late 60s and 70s. And it was a film about her life, and she did a lot for women's tennis. So when she was kind of top of her game, it was a time when the number of women's tournaments were decreasing, and she was trying to make more opportunities for women to play professionally, and she was also campaigning for equal prize money for both women and men's tournaments, kind of equivalent tournaments. And I found the film really moving. I can recommend it if anyone hasn't seen it, to watch it. And one thing that really stuck with me from the film was
something she said about that she realised very young that the opportunities that were available to her as a little girl weren't the same as the opportunities that were available to boys her age. But she also realised very young that she was very good at tennis, and she thought if she could become the best at tennis, she could use that visibility as a platform to speak out about equal opportunities and women's rights. And that made me think a lot about the reasons why I want to get better at the things I do want to get better at, and whether that's just to be able to do those things in themselves, or whether there's a kind of set of values I'm looking to promote. So I found that really interesting. But the other thing about the film was it kind of clarified a few thoughts that had been sort of muddying around in my mind a bit during the discussions in the reading group, because of its focus on professional sport, women's professional sport. And that was, like, I hadn't realised before, but men and women in tennis will never play each other apart from in doubles, because men will always win because of their upper body strength. And what that made me think about was whether women's professional tournaments then are if they're just to enable women to play in the same capacity as men. And that might be reason enough, but I suppose I couldn't help but wonder if the rules of tennis themselves disadvantaged women, why we wouldn't want to play another game that perhaps where physical strength and dominance weren't the key attributes. And I also started thinking about how a lot of the discussions that we've been having in the reading group about getting women more opportunities was so focused on about getting women opportunities, but we rarely talked about what kind of opportunities we actually wanted. And I suppose that made me wonder whether Billie Jean King's fight to get that one winning woman for a huge cash prize that meant the winning man gets was the right fight. And but I also was unsure about these ideas. Now, I was worried they were sexist thoughts, and I was nervous about voicing them to the reading group because I felt maybe they would think I was conservative, or yeah, I kind of wasn't quite there with them yet. But this actually coincided with the time that I was doing a lot more cycling, and it's been a really nice summer in Edinburgh, and because I moved there quite recently, I've been trying to get to know as much of the ground around the city as possible. I've been doing a lot of day rides, so I was kind of going less and less to the reading group and doing more and more cycling. And one thing that I really love about going on day rides around Edinburgh is stopping off at farm shops that sell really good produce, so I would always take a pannier when I went and fill up en route. And a couple of weeks ago, I was doing a ride out east of Edinburgh along the coast to North Berwick, and I don't know how many of you know Scotland, but it's incredible how many golf courses there are in Scotland, by the way. On this one route, I think it's 25 miles from Edinburgh to North Berwick, so a 50-mile round trip, and I passed 4 golf courses on the way. So anyway, I was cycling back, and I was stopping off at my favourite farm shop, which is Fenton Barnes. And I went in and bought a load of food, and I came back and I was packing it into my pannier, but I realised I'd bought too much and it wouldn't all fit in the bag. And I also stupidly had bought a box of eggs. And when I was packing this food into my bike, I suddenly realised it's not like here. The roads back home are full of potholes, that I was worried that the road surface was going to cause the eggs to break. So I just nipped back into the shop and I asked for a plastic bag for the eggs to go in, and I just hung them kind of loosely over my handlebar. But I didn't have too far to go, so I thought it would be okay, and I was cycling along, and I was joining the main road again. It's just after the village of Diddleton, just before Muirfield Golf Course. And I was kind of using my little finger and forefinger to kind of stop the bag from swinging, and the road there just starts to go downhill ever so slightly, and the tarmac is really smooth, so I picked up quite a good pace, and I was going along, and then I was distracted momentarily by a woman on my right with a camera with a very large lens, and she was taking photographs of something, and my attention was sort of drawn to her. And as I was distracted, the bag found its way in between the spokes of my wheel, and my bike stopped pretty much instantly, but neither me nor the egg stopped. We went forward through the air. And luckily there were no cars behind, but unfortunately there was a man in front and he was just on the edge of the pavement near the road. And I clipped him, knocking him off balance, and some of the eggs hit him and I landed on the floor. And there are a few moments there, I guess, that I kind of lost to, I was kind of in shock. But I sat up and I looked at him. He was a gentleman in his early 60s, smartly dressed, and he had a very angry expression on his face. But when we made eye contact, when he clocked me, he corrected that expression, I guess out of a kind of politeness. And he, we asked each other, "Are you okay? Are you okay?" And he asked if I'd hit my head, and I put my hand on my head, and I realised that I'd forgotten to put my helmet on that day. But it was okay, I hadn't hit my head, and I said I'd be fine. And then he said, "Oh, you've got something here." And I kind of wiped my face, and I guess I was kind of embarrassed about the fact that after I'd hit him, he was concerned about my appearance. It kind of added to my embarrassment, I guess, about the whole situation. And to be honest, I just wanted to get out there, so I offered him my phone number so that he could charge me for the dry cleaning because his suit was such a mess, but he refused it. So I just made sure he was okay, and I went around the corner and found a bench and sat down and kind of tried to collect myself. And I ate a scone. Someone told me once if you're in shock you should have sugar, so I sort of got myself together, and then I cycled home. And the next day was another feminist reading group meeting, and I decided to go to this one because we were reading Nina Power's One Dimensional Woman, which is about feminism coinciding with the rise of consumerism. So I thought, that this kind of maybe related to some of the thoughts I've been having, and it's also a very thin book, very easy to read, very accessible, I can recommend it. So I decided to go, and I left the house, and I had the book tucked under my arm. And I was walking down the street, and then a woman came, she was coming, just a woman in her maybe early 40s was just walking down the street, and she was going to pass me. But instead of passing me, she stopped in front of me as if she wanted to say something. And I stopped, and then she put up her hand she wanted to give me a high five. And so I gave her a high five, and then she kind of nodded at me and smiled and walked away. And I don't know about you, but I find a lot of the interactions I have on the street are based on kind of aggression, defensiveness, power plays, and this was very different, and so I felt very excited about the possibility for, I guess I also didn't really know where, I was kind of figuring out why she did that, and I was walking along, and I thought maybe she'd caught the book I was carrying, and it was something to do with that. Anyway, I was walking along, and a few more blocks along there's a small shop, like a kind of newsagent's, where I often buy milk late at night when the other shops are closed, and outside were two guys standing on the street, one quite a lot older than the other, and they were both looking at a newspaper. And as I got closer, they were looking at me, and then they were looking at the newspaper, and then they were looking at me, and then they were looking at the newspaper, and then they were looking at me again, and they were very unapologetic in the way that they were staring at me, and I felt quite uncomfortable. But I kept going, and then the older of the two shouted to me, "You can throw yourself at me any day, love," which I was pretty unimpressed by, but I knew how to pass them, so I just tried to kind of look confident, and I kept walking. But as I came close to them, the younger guy was holding up the newspaper and pointing at it. And he was pointing at a picture, but I couldn't see it, but I could read the headline, which read, "Lady lunges at golf exec." And I went over, and the picture was of me and the guy who I'd hit the day before. And I had an aggressive grimace on my face, and the eggs looked like they were coming from my hands, and I was kind of moving towards him, and he looked very afraid, and my bike was completely out of shot. And I took the newspaper and I read it, and I learnt that the guy who I had hit the day before was a guy called Peter Dawson, who is the director of the Royal and Ancient Golf Society. And it said that apparently he had been getting a lot of press earlier in the summer because in June, Muirfield Golf Course, the golf course that I was passing when I hit him, had been the venue for the Open tournament, which is the big international golf tournament, Open Championship. I was learning about golf as I was reading this, so I was kind of trying to take it all in. But basically, he had been responsible for the No Women Members policy at Muirfield Golf Course. And the reason why this championship had had a lot of press coverage earlier in the year is because a lot of people felt it was inappropriate for such a big tournament to be held at a golf course where no women members were allowed. And Peter Dawson was one of the men responsible for the ongoing No Women Members policy. And the press were clearly enjoying this situation as a way of revisiting that controversy, that scandal. So I was kind of trying to take all this in, and the guys with the newspaper were trying to talk to me, and they were trying to kind of ask me questions. But I was feeling quite exposed and a bit confused, so I gave them the newspaper back and I ran to Kathy's house just to get there as quickly as possible. So I rang the bell, and Kathy buzzed me in, and I went up the stairs, and the reading group was sat around, and they looked at me when I arrived, and they were like, "Whoa!" Nice. They were like affecting kind of congratulatory sounds, you know, like "What the hell?" And Sarah, one of the women in the group, had said that she'd actually been to the opening of the tournament to protest. But she said, you know, she had just taken a placard. She hadn't thought about taking it. Same thing. Look, no, it was an accident. I was trying to explain this, and but they were quite, you know, they were saying like, you don't need to justify this to us. You know, and I said, like I really said, like, no, it was an accident. I had a bike accident. Explained the whole story, and then they asked me lots of questions, and eventually they kind of understood, you know, and then I guess we laughed together, and they found it funny, and I was it was a relief to laugh, I suppose, but I also still felt quite weird about it, so I decided to go home. I didn't stay for the discussion, and I went home and I called my mum and I explained to her what had happened, and she said, like, not to worry, because this is how it is with the media. By tomorrow everyone will have forgotten, like no one will remember this story, you know, it'll blow over, you don't need to worry about it, you know, she said just forget about it, basically. And I felt better, and I tried to just do normal things for the evening, and I went to bed, whatever, and then the next day the telephone rang, and it was a journalist from the Scotsman, and he was asking for a telephone interview, and he was pretty persistent, I would say, despite me saying I didn't want to speak about it. I guess that's how they get their stories. And in the end I actually just put the phone down on him because I didn't, you know, I hadn't thought about what I was going to say because of what my mum had said. I got very relaxed, I didn't think it was going to come up again. But as soon as I put the phone down, I started to think about what the consequences were of what I said next. So I started to think, what if I explained the truth and said that it was an accident, and I had, you know, it was, you know, that it was nothing to do with the protest. And then I started to think about what if I was becoming a hindrance for women's rights movements, and what if I was an instrument in preventing women playing at this golf club in the future. And I also thought about the woman who had given me a high five in the street, and I thought about how disappointed she might be. And then I started to think about what would be the consequences of me saying that it had been an act of protest. And I guess I started to think about that I could help in some way, that I might be able to help this cause, that maybe I could be instrumental in women's rights, or particularly to do with the members' policy at golf clubs across the UK. And I guess I would say I'm someone find conflict difficult sometimes, and I guess I would love to be someone that would go that extra step to do something I believed in, and I guess I was a bit seduced by the idea that this could be a way for me to be that person that I would love to be. And I guess I was around about here in my thoughts when the phone rang again, and it was the same journalist. And the journalist said, I just need a line, just a quote to print. You know, I just need just a sentence. And without really thinking about it too hard, I just said, he fucking deserved it. And then I put and since that's gone to print, I mean, I've been receiving different kinds of letters. Particularly to do, there's been rumours that Muirfield Golf Course are changing their gender policy, and they say that has nothing to do with my actions. Certain women's groups say it's entirely down to me, and I've had letters of thanks about that and praise. I actually, weirdly, a few days ago, I also got a call from Alex Salmond's secretary. So Alex Salmond, for anyone who doesn't know, is the First Minister of Scotland, and interestingly, he is a big fan of golf, but he boycotted the Open Championships because of the controversy around no women members policy at Muirfield. And his secretary asked if I wanted to meet him and would have my photograph taken with him, but he is also heading up the campaign for the referendum for Scotland's independence. And suddenly I didn't know if me getting my photograph taken with him was a strategy for him to get more support from women for the yes vote, you know? And I haven't decided whether to vote yes or no yet, so that's the thing, I was getting involved in all these, you know, all these kind of things that but actually, just before I left to come here, a kind of expose was printed by The Sun, and Peter Dawson kind of telling the full story that I was a fraud, and it had been an accident, and actually a photograph was printed with the bike shot with the and actually it was a pretty humiliating experience, that story, because I mean he kind of, well, you can imagine what the writing was like. So I guess if you read about that story in the newspapers and or you hear about it, I'm sure there'll be other points of view expressed, and it's good. I think it's just good to remember, that with these things, you don't always have time to think through your actions. You sometimes have to act more quickly, and it's not only about time. I mean, the world is just is chaotic.
Hi, to start this performance, I need a volunteer from the audience to come on stage. But it needs to be someone that I've never met before, so someone I've never had a conversation with. So if that applies to you and you would like to come on stage, please do now. Thank you. So I thought we could start by each stating our assumptions about each other. All the assumptions we have about each other. We don't have very much information about each other, but just by looking and being with each other, then we can take it in turns to say what the things that come to mind are that we assume about each other, and that could be anything. Personality, background, beliefs or values, anything that comes to mind from looking at each other.
So I don't know if you have a preference about going first. I'm happy to go first. Or you can.
Sweet eyes.
You are born in Spain.
You love dance.
Sorry, say that again, sorry.
You love dance.
You feel an affinity for animals. So I think you have some pets, maybe a cat, and you feel you can communicate well with the cat.
When you are alone, a lot of time you imagine that you are flying.
You're a woman.
You don't have a lot of friends. Only important friends.
Sensuality is important to you, so you have a close relationship to your body and you like to feel touch. Touch is important for you, and sex is important to you, and you're able to enjoy it because you're good at being in the moment. You're good at not thinking when you want to be present.
When you was a child, you wanted to be a boy, to play more.
When you are in groups of people, you don't speak so much. You're not very dominant. You tend to sit at the side more and watch other people.
You like the nature and to walk a lot of hours in silence and see the trees and count the list.
you are not from a wealthy family and you don't earn a lot of money and your financial instability sometimes worries you, and you worry about the future, but you try to know that things will be okay, but sometimes you're not sure.
A lot of things in this world, they are boring for you. You don't have TV, you don't watch TV for many years. And you cannot understand the people, the majority. You live with a lot of questions. Why? Why? Why?
Okay, for the next part of the show, what I hope we can do is we each teach each other or explain something to each other that the other person will then perform for the audience. So that could be anything. It could be a song or a dance or a story or a piece of information. And it doesn't have to be something that only we know, the thing that we teach, but it should be something relevant to our lives in some way. So we're going to go backstage to do that, and then we're going to come out and perform it for you. So we'll be back shortly. Nani manani, nami nami nancho. Nani manani, damanancho. Nami ni nami na 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 cho. Nani manani, nana mancho.
Hi, I want to tell you a joke. So there is a man. He loves the tractors, and he has a lot of tractors. He has big tractors, small tractors, drawing tractors, tows with tractors, movie with tractors. He really loves the tractors, and one day he met a woman, and they fell in love, and they began the relation. But the woman couldn't understand how this man loves these tractors. So finally she said, I cannot more live with you. I cannot have relation with you. And the man said, but why? Because you love your tractors and they are a lot and I cannot more. So she left him. He was very sad, very sad, very sad, and throw all the tractors. So, and it was very sad, yes. And he went to the bar and began to drink. So 1 beer, 2 beer, 3 beer, 4 beer, 5 beer, and finally was very drunk. And the barman, he asked for other beer, and the barman said, no. And the man said, okay, if I take out all the smoke here from the bar, you will give me a beer? So the barman thought and said, okay, because this is impossible. And the man was inside of the bar and made, and went outside. And went. Finally, all the smoke was outside. And the barman asked, but how is possible? How you did it? And he said, I'm an ex-tractor fan.
Did you enjoy telling the joke?
Oh yes, it was so funny.
How did you feel when people laughed?
I like it.
Do you think of yourself as a funny person?
No, I think that I'm so bored person sometimes. No, but normally I'm bored.
Are you born in Spain?
No.
Where are you born?
Sofia, Bulgaria.
Can you repeat that? I think someone didn't hear.
Sofia, Bulgaria.
Do you live in Copenhagen?
No. I'm living in Barcelona.
What's it like to live in Barcelona?
Sorry?
What's it like to live in Barcelona?
What's it's like?
You like living in Barcelona?
I love Barcelona, but now I don't like a lot to live in Barcelona. Barcelona is bye-bye.
Why is that?
It's full of tourists and it's not interesting.
And where will you go?
To Sofia, Bulgaria.
Are you a dancer?
No, I wanted to be a dancer. I studied 2 years from 6 to 8 and I miss it a lot, but I'm not a dancer. I just lost my time.
Do you ever dance though? I mean, do you still dance maybe on your own or?
I had one period that I dance a lot alone and with people, but from some years I don't dance.
How come?
I don't know. A lot of other things. I dance with my daughter. Sometimes, yes.
That's interesting.
How old are you?
28.
Is the first time you're in Copenhagen?
No.
How you decided to make this performance?
I wanted to find a way of things being a little less planned, not so planned ahead, and for there to be space for another person to surprise me.
And how came the idea, the first time that you had this idea?
I've been doing some improvisation classes, kind of comedy improvisation classes where we'll play a lot of games. Like exercises where you have to listen to the other person and react to what they say. And I guess it came from some of those ideas.
Do you have some dream that supports you in your life?
Do you say dream?
Dream or project that supports you in difficult moments in your life?
I'm not sure. People, I guess. People support me in difficult moments in my life.
Can you describe your best friend?
My best friend? I guess that's a combination of lots of people.
Only one.
Only one person. Okay. I think the reason why it's difficult to describe only one is I feel that there's no one person that gives me everything I need, and lots of people have different qualities, and I need all those different qualities. I'm avoiding the question.
That's interesting.
Is nature important to you?
Yes, the nature is very important for me.
So how come you live in the city?
It's difficult for me, but now I want to make this change, to go more near to the nature.
And what made you choose to live in a city before?
Before, when I was 18 years old, when I chose Barcelona, for example, was because I wanted to live in Barcelona. Just Barcelona was the only one city in the world that I wanted to live.
Had you been there before?
Never.
Where did this idea come from?
Because when I was very young, very young, I really loved Freddie Mercury, and Freddie Mercury loved Barcelona. So my mom told me the story that, because he was born 5th of September, me too, so my mom told me the story that Freddie Mercury, somebody made a cake with the form of the cathedral from Barcelona, and for his birthday sent by plane to London. But the cake broke, you know. So I remember this, and I said, and my mom said, because Freddie loved Barcelona. I said, if I love Freddie, and Freddie loved Barcelona, so I will love Barcelona. So, and this was why I was 12, 13 years old, and until 18 I built this dream. So 18 years old I went to Barcelona.
That's interesting.
Do you like me? Or I'm broken your performance?
Yes, I like you.
Thank you. Do you have some important door you close in your life forever that was very difficult, hard, sad, some that you had to choose between, and in one moment you had to close the door?
I would say I've had a life without too many difficult things. I would say I've had generally quite a happy life, and quite an easy life in many ways. but there have been some times where there's been difficult things. That's what you asked?
Could be some situation, or could be with one person.
Mm-hmm. I had a situation where I lived with someone, a flatmate, in Germany, in Berlin, and he had a very chaotic inner life, and he what we would call went crazy when I was living with him, and he had a kind of mental breakdown, and I had this sensation when I saw him when I came home this day. When I looked into his eyes, I didn't know he was different. I didn't recognize him anymore. I never had this experience before, where you look at someone you know, and you look into their eyes, and then they're not there anymore. It's someone else entirely, someone completely different. It was quite an extreme experience. But I wanted to help him, but I didn't really know how to help him. So I took him to the hospital. But the strange thing is there that somehow the hospital didn't make sense either. You know, the doctor was telling me that he was crazy and that they would give him lots of drugs. So I was in this situation between feeling estranged from both the world of sanity and the world of madness. And that was quite difficult. And in a way, I kind of took a coward's way out, and I left. And now I'm not really in touch with him, and sometimes I feel like I ran away a bit from that situation.
What are you afraid? The most important thing that you really is afraid? I don't know. It's
afraid.
Afraid. Yeah.
Something I'm afraid of.
Your fears.
I am afraid of realizing at the end of my life that I got it. I made a mistake, or I misunderstood something, or I got it all wrong.
That's interesting.
What are you afraid of?
I'm afraid of lost the control.
How do you deal with that?
Sometimes I'm not conscious, but when I'm conscious about this, so I try to make exercise, so to open my mind, to see the other people, to accept this verb is very difficult for me, accept. And I'm dealing, but I'm not okay with this.
Can you give, do you feel in control now?
Now I'm fine. I'm not thinking about the control because you are the performer. I really trust you.
Okay.
Nani 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 mi nani 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 na.
I just want to tell you a joke. There was a man, and he really loved tractors. He loved tractors so much that he had 3 tractors on his driveway, and he had tractor wallpaper and tractor slippers. He was subscribed to Tractor Monthly, Tractor Weekly, and Tractor Annual. The annual, he would get the annual delivered. And his hedges on the front of his lawn were cut into the shape of hedges, and he had a lake in his garden also in the shape of a tractor. And did I say hedges cut into the shape of hedges? Hedges cut into the shape of tractors. And he knew how to take all his tractors apart and put them back together again. And whenever he went to work selling tractors, he would drive his tractor to work through the city. And he actually could only say tractor, the word tractor, as well as tractor model numbers. That was the extent of his ability for speech. And and because of that, it was difficult for him to make friends and meet people. He knew some other tractor enthusiasts, but I don't know, he never found anyone that he really clicked with. But one day he met a woman, and they started seeing each other, and he really fell for her. He loved her, and they were going out for a while. But then after a while, the tractors just got too much, basically, and she was like, "I've had it with these tractors. I can't take any more tractors. When I pour out my cereal in the morning, instead of cereal, it's just little plastic tractors. And when we're having sex, then you're just shouting out tractor parts. And I've had it with you. It's too late. I'm leaving." And she left him, and he was absolutely heartbroken. And he was sitting alone in his house, and he would look around, he'd look at his wallpaper, and he'd see a tractor, and he'd think of her, and he'd feel sad. He'd look at his slippers, he'd see a tractor, he'd think of her, he'd feel sad. Looked at the hedges, and every time he spoke, the words tractors were just, and he'd just cry at his own speech, because so he was like, well, this is it, I'm gonna have to get rid of all my tractors. And he cut the hedge just off at the base like that, and then he drove his tractors off a cliff, and he burnt large amounts of the content of his house, and he learnt some new vocabulary, and but he was still miserable, so he went to the pub, and he was by the bar, and he said, "Give me a drink," and he drank it, and he said, "Give me another drink." Drinking loads, and then he was really drunk, and he said, give me another drink." And the barman said, "No, I can't give you another drink because you're drunk, you've had enough." And he said, "Come on, you gotta give me another drink, I'm miserable, give me another drink." And the barman said, "No, I can't, I'm afraid you're drunk and I can't serve you." And he said, it's before the days of the smoking ban, by the way, he said, "If I can take all this smoke out of this bar, will you give me another drink?" And he said, looked around, and he was like, "Yeah, this guy's wasted, he's never going to manage that." And he said, "Yeah, sure, I'll give you another drink if you can take all the smoke out of this bar." And he said, "Fine." And he took a deep breath in. He went outside, and he breathed it out. He went back into the bar, and he breathed in. And he went outside the bar, and breathed it out. Went inside the bar, but outside the bar. Inside of the bar now. I don't know. And eventually the smoke was gone, and the barman was like, "Wow, how did you do that?" And he said, "That's easy. I'm an Extractor fan.
In 1974, I was visiting a friend in Naples, and one day I was just walking alone through the city, and I was walking along the Costa Campana, and I was passing a gallery on my left, and it had a glass front, and as I passed, I saw a group of people gathered inside the gallery, and I was interested to know what was going on, so I went into the gallery, and I saw that there were this group of people, and they were gathered around a woman who was standing in the centre of them, and the woman was standing very still. She was standing completely still, and she was just looking straight ahead. And she was also topless, so she had her chest revealed, she had no clothes on upper half of her body. And to the side there was a table with objects on top of it, and one of the objects was a gun. And that was one of the first things I noticed about the situation. And a guy came over to me, and it was clear he was working for the gallery, or he had some kind of official capacity. And I asked him what was going on, and he explained that the woman who was standing very still, she was the artist, and she had invited people, gallery visitors, the people around, to do whatever they liked to her body using the objects that she had provided on the table. And he said, and one of the objects is a gun. So he he was kind of excited about this, and he took great pleasure in telling me that one of the objects was a gun. So I went over and I just stood at the side, and I was just watching what was going on. And I realised quite quickly that the reason the woman didn't have any clothes on her upper half is because someone had obviously ripped them off or cut them off. And there was quite an aggressive feeling in the air. There was a kind of tension. It felt quite aggressive somehow. And a man picked up a Polaroid camera from the table, and he took a photo of her, which again, and she didn't respond, she was just looking straight ahead. And again, it felt kind of aggressive somehow, you know. And the gun that was on the table was clearly untouched. It was, in English we have this expression, an elephant in the room. It was the elephant in the room, so yeah, you obviously know what that means. Everyone was thinking about it, but no one wanted to talk about it. No one was addressing the gun. I started just trying to understand the situation. And I started to think about how this woman, she was so still and so silent. And everyone was watching her somehow, you know. People were talking amongst themselves, but still the attention was on her. And then I was thinking about myself, and I was standing completely still, completely silent, and no one was looking at me. And it made me think about how silence can be a great strategy at keeping power, but only when you have power in the first place. Otherwise, being silent has the opposite effect. So by me being silent, no one was interested in me. In fact, no one even knew I was there. So I started to think, oh, what are the possibilities of the things that I could do? How could I interact with this situation? And I had a few ideas, but somehow very quickly I felt like I was limited, or I was trapped in some way. Like the ideas wouldn't go very far. And actually the one thing that kind of kept coming back to me that I wanted to do was to take the gun from the table and push it into her mouth and say, is this what you wanted? Is this what you wanted? If so, why not say it straight, bitch? But I didn't do that, I just watched, and actually after a while a woman did pick up the gun, like a very ordinary looking woman, and there was also a bullet on the table, and she loaded the gun, and she pointed it at the standing woman's neck, like this, pointed at it, and the standing woman didn't respond, she just stayed absolutely still, in the way she had been for the whole time. And the room went very quiet, and it was clear that people were shocked by this, which seemed strange to me because I kind of felt like, oh, we'd already sort of telepathically communicated that we would get to this point. We would at some point get to this point at which someone would point the gun at the standing woman. But anyway, people seemed shocked, and very quickly the guy who would talk to me when I first came into the gallery took the gun away and closed the situation down, and I left, and I was walking on the street, and I was kind of imagining to myself what would happen if someone from the gallery came after me and asked me why I didn't interact with the situation. And I was imagining what I would answer to this question, why I didn't do anything. And I was thinking, if someone asked me that from the gallery, I would say very casually, like, oh, you know, it's a kind of trap, you know, either you do something and she doesn't respond, so you're stuck in this kind of power impasse, or you don't do anything and nothing happens, so, you know, and I would have said it very casually, you know, as if I was kind of above all this art play and its childish flirtations with death. But inside I hated her. I hated her for creating this trap, and I hated her for bringing out the worst in everyone in the room. And I hated her for pretending like she didn't know what was going to happen. You know, putting the gun on the table and then being like, oh, you know, just whatever, in case it comes in handy, here, have this. Or, you know, because she knew what was going to happen. As soon as she made that decision to put the gun on the table, she knew what was going to happen, and I hated her for that. And she knew what was going to happen because a gun is not a bag of sweets. It's not a pair of fluffy slippers. It's not a mountain view or a cup of hot chocolate on a winter's day. And I hated her for that, and I carried the hate with me for the rest of the day, and I was walking around the town, and I got a cup of coffee in a cafe, and I sat and I was replaying all the things that I could have done differently in that gallery to see how, you know, trying to imagine how I could have changed the situation. And I came up with a new version of events, and this is how it went. In 1974, I was visiting a friend in the city of Naples, and I was walking on the street, the Costa Campana, and I was passing the gallery with a glass front, and inside I saw a group of people gathered, and I was interested to know what was going on, so I went into the gallery, and I could see very quickly that there was a group of people stood around a woman who was standing very still, completely silent, and she didn't have any clothes on her top half of her body. And there was a table to one side with some objects on the top, and one of the objects was a gun. That was one of the first things I noticed. And a guy who was obviously working for the gallery or had some kind of official role came over to me, and I asked him what was happening, and he said that the woman who was standing very still in the centre of the room was the artist, and she had invited gallery visitors to do whatever they liked to her body using the objects on the table. And I went over, and I stood at the side and I watched, and I saw a man pick up a Polaroid camera from the table and take a photo of her, of the standing woman. And then, after a short while, a woman, a very ordinary looking woman, took the gun off the table and loaded it and pointed it at the standing woman's neck like this. And at this point, the whole room went quiet, and people seemed to be shocked. And it was then that I walked into the group. And as I walked into the circle, people kind of parted slightly to let me through. But they didn't want to take their eyes off, you know, off the deadly weapon that was being pointed at this woman's neck. They couldn't take their eyes off it, but they were also kind of distracted by me, who was just walking through them. So there was this kind of confusion about where to look. And I went and I took one end of the table like this and gestured to ask if someone would take the other end of the table, which they did, a guy did, and we lifted it and we moved it to the edge of the room. And then I cleared all the objects off the table with my arm, and I got up onto the table and I stood on the table and I said, hey everyone, listen to this. And I didn't actually need to say that because they were already looking at me. The room was quite small. So the woman was holding the gun at the standing woman's neck, and the standing woman was standing looking straight ahead, still not responding, and everyone was looking at me on the table. And I said, what is the 4-letter Italian word for goodbye? And no one said anything. And I said, it's bang. And they didn't laugh like you're laughing. They were completely silent. And they looked confused for a while. And then one guy at the back of the room, about where you're sitting, furthest from me, he just let out a little giggle. And that giggle kind of spread to his group of friends who were around him. And then they were laughing, and then gradually the laughter rippled through everyone in the room until the whole room was in complete hysterics, like uncontrollable laughter. Many people had tears coming down their face because they were weeping from the laughter. And even the woman who was holding the gun to the standing woman's neck had let it fall by her side, and she was kind of bent over, and she was holding her sides from the pain of the laughter of the situation. And everyone was laughing, apart from the standing woman, who was very still and still looking straight ahead. But you could see on her face that she was fighting it, you know, like there was laughter, she was laughing inside, and she was trying her best not to laugh. But after a while, you could see just the, the corners of her mouth kind of twitching a bit, and gradually it became a kind of smile, and then she was gone, and she was also creased in half with laughter, and the whole room was howling, absolutely howling. So I got off the table and I was high-fiving everyone. I was like going to the room, yeah, and everyone was giving me a high five. And it looked like I was going, that I had no intent in my direction, that I was just going around giving everyone a high five, but actually I was heading for the woman with a gun. And when I got to her, I kind of put my arm around her, and she was still, creased in half with laughter. And I put my hands between her hands and the gun, and she didn't notice because she was laughing so much. And I lifted it and pointed it to my head, and after that, I don't know what happened. I guess it was, the room probably would have been silent for a short time, and probably eventually a kind of panic would have set in, and people would have started screaming, and probably most people would have run out the door. And maybe the standing woman would have stayed, actually. Maybe she would have stayed, and I imagine she would have been calm and maybe a bit dazed. She would have walked around in front of my body, and when I'd fired the gun, I'd made sure I was standing in front of the largest, most empty of the gallery walls so that it could receive my brains as they came out the back of my skull. And I imagine she might have spent some time looking at the painting I'd made, thinking whether there was any meaning to be found in the bloody mess. And I would have just been lying there on the floor, looking up at her with a blank expression that said, I won.